Welcome, everyone, to this important hearing, and I would like to thank Secretary Geithner for joining us. This is your second hearing today and fourth this week, so you're halfway there. Yes, so well, you are a glutton, I'll tell you that. We know that defending this budget is no easy task, so we really do appreciate your time.
Not as hard as your job.
Yeah, all right.
On your budget.
It's going to be a fun day.
You have my sympathy, you do.
I do. I appreciate it. And you're about to get mine, but in a different way. It's pretty well known that one of your favorite sayings, which I really enjoy this, is plan beats no plan. It's a phrase you use often during the financial crisis to describe the need for policymakers to plan for every contingency in order to stay ahead of events. You were in the middle of the firestorm of the crash as a Fed New York chair. You of all people know this. I remember those days vividly. I remember your predecessor and the chairman of the Federal Reserve coming here talking about crises, deflationary spirals, all about the impending collapse of the economy. It was a very, very ugly moment, and what came out of that was ugly legislation. It was ugly legislation because the whole thing caught us by surprise, all of us. And the circumstances could not be more different today, because back then, we faced a crisis that most people didn't see coming. Today, we're facing the most predictable crisis in our nation's history. And yet, for a fourth year in a row, you brought us this. This is no plan. This is no plan to restrain spending, to grow the economy, and most of all, it's no plan to save us from a debt-fueled crisis, which would be an economic disaster for all of us. If plan beats no plan, then why has the president once again decided to duck from the drivers of our debt? Why has he once again given us more broken promises instead of leadership, excuses instead of accountability? Instead of cooperation where agreement is possible, and we'd like to think there is some of that, why have we seen the president turn his back on the bipartisan solutions that have been percolating out there? Why has he decided to base his re-election strategy on dividing Americans for political gain, in our estimation? After House Republicans put forward a serious solution in our budget last year, the president had an opportunity to advance plans for meeting our challenges, to advance alternatives, to then compromise. And if, in fact, there is a growing bipartisan consensus for the reforms that are needed, there's a growing bipartisan consensus on contentious issues like entitlement spending and tax reform, reforms based on premium support, which would strengthen Medicare by introducing choice and competition. They have a bipartisan history. The history dates back to John Breaux and Bill Frist and Bill Thomas under the Clinton Commission. It continues with the work done by Alice Rivlin and Pete Domenici at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and it includes the work that I've recently done with Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon to put a bipartisan option for saving and strengthening Medicare. Fundamental tax reform also has a bipartisan history. In 1986, I was in high school at the time, but I read the book. We did fundamental tax reform that lowered tax rates and broadened the base. The congressional sponsors of that bill, Dick Gephardt and Bill Bradley. So I would argue that this is not necessarily a left versus right issue. This is about those who are willing to tell the people the truth about our nation's fiscal challenges and those who continue to duck from those challenges. This budget takes the latter approach. It represents a very clear threat to the health and retirement security for American seniors. It threatens our prosperity by fueling growth of government with ever higher taxes, and it commits our children and our grandchildren to a diminished future. I don't know how you conclude otherwise. Secretary Geithner, you'd probably be the first to acknowledge that having no plan is a plan in and of itself. It's a plan for failure. It's a plan to stay in the debt crisis. And having no plan means we are planning for decline as a nation. The point of this hearing is to find out why that kind of future for our country is apparently acceptable in this budget and to this administration. I hope your testimony can provide answers. I look forward to a great conversation. And with that, I want to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Van Hollen.